Welcome to yet another exciting edition of Sports Talk here on the Likely Television Network. On this edition of the program, Nigerian cricketers intensify preparation in faraway India. Meanwhile, coming in from the world of tennis, the Australian Open is here with very difficult draws in view. Everton sacks club manager. Details of these and many more will be yours when we return from the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Sports Talk here on Atlantic Television, and Kingsley Manuel is with me.
Thank you very much for having me, Siri. Very happy to be here this morning.
Okay, let's get started. And we'll start from the world of athletics and first look at the National Sports Commission, where they have approved the immediate posting of Secretary Generals to the various sports commission of federations here in Nigeria. We've talked about the National Sports Commission under the leadership of Shehu Diko and Olakpade, and it looks like the both of them are now beginning to put their words into action with the immediate posting of Secretary General to the various sporting federations here in Nigeria.
I think for me it's very pertinent. I think work has started, and they have to make sure that they make sure that everything is in place to see how they can carry out their various activities at this point in time. The work of the Secretary General is very, very essential. Of course, they are the one, of course, to make sure that they keep records and make sure that whatever is being talked about is actually being documented, and also ensure that all of them are also being implemented at the end of the day. So I think it is very, very necessary at this point in time for them to, of course, get their place, their position, to make sure they get started. The year has started, and whatever they have actually planned, talking about the National Sport Commission, they must look for a means, of course, to implement them. Now, one of the secretary is Rita Mosindi. Of course, remember her, the lady, of course, who was in charge of that misconduct we saw at the Olympic Games for Favour Philly. I think she also, as well, has also been transferred. So I think at this point in time, Shehu Diko don't want to leave any stone unturned. He wants to make sure that everything is in place, so that whoever that do not do his or her job very well, the person, of course, will be held accountable, for it. So I think this move will definitely help things, of course, to go well when it has to do with sports down here in Nigeria.
Talking about Rita, who was actually, fingered in that misconduct that affected Favour Philly at the last games. Is it proper to move her to yet another federation? One would have thought that she should have been punished one way or the other, because that misconduct actually put the career of Favour Philly, in some minor situation, if you ask me. And of course, I haven't painted the country in a bright light.
Yeah, for me, I think that was what Nigerians were expecting. And for what we saw, I think there was a committee that was actually put in place to carry out investigation, and they came up with an investigation that she was at fault, due to what happened to Favour Philly at the Paris Olympic Game. But we were actually waiting to see what would be the punishments, for her. But at the end of the day, nothing has been done yet. We don't know.
Merely moving her from one federation to the other is, for me, not an enough punishment for what looks to me like a very serious offense that affected the career of girl, because this is not the first time she's been involved in such a rumble, and now it slowed down her career. And so I think beyond that, we should have people punished appropriately. But what do we know? But I will hope that the National Sports Commission will continue to intensify on this and inform Nigerians of decisions taken by the panel that looked into this investigation, because it's not just enough to move out from maybe the Athletics Federation to yet another federation. Now let's go to cricket and talk about cricket this hour. Nigeria's under-19 women's cricket team, the junior Yellow Greens, are currently fine-tuning their drills at the Cricket Institute out there in India ahead of the 2025 International Cricket Council Women's Under-19 Cricket World Cup coming up in Malaysia. Kinsley, these junior Yellow Greens will be flying Nigeria's flag in the Under-16 tournament, which will be played from the 18th, which is just about, call it another 10 days from now, to February 2nd.
I think for me it's a good one. You talk about preparation. I think the preparation has been, of course, very intense at this point in time, and that's to tell you that, they are very much ready, for this particular one. I think we must give kudos, to the president of the Cricket Federation, Uya Pata. I think since last year, he has really shown, a very, very impressive, gesture in making sure that, we develop cricket down here in Nigeria. And that's what we've seen as well, even getting down to this year as well, preparation being done in time. The cricketers, of course, have to engage themselves in some kind of, training games to make sure that, they get themselves in time. I think for me, that's actually, the right way to go. When you actually undergo preparation in time, it helps you, of course, to gain balance when you get down to the competition. And that's, for me, a very good way at this point in time. We just hope for the best, for the Nigerian cricket team. Nigerian
cricket team preparing ahead of the International Cricket Council Under-19 Women's Championship. But for them to get ready for the championship proper, they will have to contend with their cricketers from Pakistan and Kinsley and Scotland as well, before looking up to the very test against Malaysia. What do you think of this international friendly? They are aimed at getting the cricketers of the under-19 cadre in top shape.
I think for me it's a good way. You take a look at Pakistan, it's a cricket nation. Even Scotland as well, also a cricket nation. So when you play with experienced, countries or experienced nations that knows what it means, of course, to play cricket, even though at the end of the day you do not get the needed result, it's a way of equipping you. It's a way of, shaping up your mentality to make sure that whatever you face, whenever the competition comes, means that, of course, you were very much, prepared. So for me, it's actually a good one at this point in time, testing our strength with, the best cricket nations in the world. I think for me, that's the way to go. And for me, I must commend the Cricket Federation in organizing this particular one in order to make sure that, of course, the cricketers get themselves, in shape before the main competition.
Nigerian cricketers must be in shape ahead of the International Under-19 International Cricket Council tournament. It's just a few days from now, and we'll follow it up for you here on the Atlantic Television Network. Now, let's look at tennis. And talking about tennis, the Nigerian team are neck deep in preparations for the International Tennis Federation and, of course, Confederation of African Tennis, West Africa and Central African Junior Tennis Championship holding in Lomé, Togo. Kinsley, the Nigerian squad is headlined by Chukudubem Amasiani, and of course we have very experienced Shei Gusanyi as well, all camped in the National Stadium in Lagos ahead of this. It's a junior cadre tournament, and you expect to see enterprising young stars from Nigeria.
It's good of a thing that we're even participating in this one. I think we're talking about development of table tennis in the country, and as it stands, would really not have seen those who could possibly fill in the shoes of the big names we have already on ground, the likes of Aruna Quadri, them, and the rest of them. But I think from this particular one, maybe we can make sport talents that could also give us that huge representation when it has to do with global competition. This is a ground, this is an opportunity where we have to catch them young. It's actually a platform where the Nigerian Table Tennis Federation really have to put their eyes down to make sure that they start grooming, another Aruna Quadri, another Terola, Funko, Shunaike, and the rest of them. I think for me, we'll just look forward to see them having a very impressive performance. But when you talk about cricket, table tennis in the country, it hasn't been in the best shape. And we hope that this year the Nigerian Table Tennis Federation will not just relax, just like we've seen in the other years. They will definitely, of course, bounce back and see how they can revive table tennis in the country. And I think it starts with this particular championship.
Talking about table tennis and, of course, legendary Haruna Quadri. Only yesterday, we saw him in Doha in a victorious mood by defeating British champion Liam Bradford to advance to the third round of the men's singles of the World Table Tennis Star Contender Championship taking place in Qatar. Kisley, Haruna Quadri continues to show that, yes, he's not completely tired of gaining laurels and, of course, image for Nigeria.
Not completely tired. Yes, this is just his first game. We look forward to see him, in the next encounter. Didn't actually have this. Actually, he didn't start very well in this one. We understand he lost in the first game 10-12, but was able to bounce back. In the second set of that one, 11-9. And he also got 11-9, 11-9 as well in the other sets. And that was why he was able, of course, to be victorious in that particular encounter. From what we're saying, I think we need to see a more energetic Haruna Quadri, a more determined Haruna Quadri. Last year, it wasn't really a rosy year for him. We saw him trying to at least get to the top of some tournament, but all of a sudden you see him drop, So for me, I think this year, Haruna Quadri should really step up. We understand age not really by his side. Probably his age might be affecting his performance, and all of that. But I think he really needs to live on a high if he's actually looking forward to retire anytime soon. He is the best we have, in the country. And whenever he's playing such a tournament, you have a good representation, even down here, of course, in Nigeria. So for me, a good start for Haruna Quadri for the year. But I really want to see him, of course, putting that much energy to, of course, get to the top once again.
No doubt, energetic Haruna Quadri making Nigeria proud there. He moves now into the third round and coming up against a very difficult opponent. Alvaro Rebol from Spain will be his opponent. Talking about this Spaniard, he took out his Japanese contender in the second round. Do you think this will be a handful for Haruna Quadri?
Of course, it will be, of course, not an easy one for what I'm saying, because the Spanish, of course, also they have that much experience when it has to do with table tennis. You talk about the Spanish, the Chinese, the Japanese. These are countries, that have good table tennis players at the end of the day. And I think for me, Haruna Quadri will really have to step up his game from what we saw in the second round. From the second stage, he has to maybe add more energy to what he did in the last game to make sure that, of course, he gets past this particular one. As the competition, increases, you have to, of course, up your game, or else you might actually fall short.
Is the International Table Tennis Championship ongoing in Doha, Qatar? And we have another African, in the mix, Dina Meshref, remember her? Who competes for Egypt. She was unlucky, I was unable to overcome China's Xinying in the second round with a 3-1 loss.
So sad for Meshref. Of course, you talk about table tennis down in Africa. I think she has been the best so far. You take a look at it. I don't think we'll have any other name down here in Africa that can really compete with her, as it stands. But so sad that she was not able to get her. Or like I mentioned, you don't play with the Chinese when it comes to table tennis, and that's what, of course, it is at this point in time. You really have to be on your toes. You really have to be up there for you to take away, table tennis players, from the Chinese or the Japanese. They are very, very good when it comes to it. But I think for this point in time, you say it's a poor start, for her. But I think she can possibly pick up the pieces and see how she can put herself back, maybe in subsequent tournaments.
Poor one for Meshref from Egypt there, but we hope she will be able to bounce back much later. As talking about tennis, from table tennis now, let's go to lawn tennis. And talking about lawn tennis is about that time of the year when biggest and of course the first Grand Slam of the year gets underway. The Australian Open is underway because already we have qualifiers going on. But for the main draws, it's been, let's say, a very difficult one, I must say, because Imara Rakhanu is now reported to be the only British player to have a draw against a seed at the opening game. At the Australian Open. Kinsley, we've seen the draws yesterday. Very difficult fixtures, I must say, or difficult draws. And the British often want to try to see how they can bounce back at least with the Australian Open, but it looks like it's going to be even more difficult this time around.
It's going to be more difficult, you know, from what we're saying. The British players, for me, they've not really lived up to expectation, you know, for some years now. You talk about even in the male and the female category, the likes of Cameron Norrie, Emma Raducanu, you know, Evans and the rest of them, they've not really stepped up their game. Emma Raducanu has been the worst, you know. She has not really been up there, you know, ever since she won that US Open. I think that was about 3 years ago. Emma Raducanu has been the shadow of herself. But this time, I think she's actually look a little bit rejuvenated, a new coach, and she's been training behind the scene, trying to get herself, of course, you know, intact. And this time, she's been paired, of course, in her first game against Russia's Ekaterina Vandrousova. If you ask me, a very tough opponent, if you ask me, for Emma Raducanu, especially when you take a look at the form of Emma Raducanu. If things were to go the other way around, that Emma Raducanu, of course, is in good form, you won't say this would be a very tough, you know, one for her. But for the fact that she has not really lived up to expectation in the past games, it means this one will have to be a very huge one for her. But let's see what she'll be able to do this year. It's a new year for Emma Raducanu. It's actually a new face, to put it that way. I think she should be looking forward to bring herself back, of course, to limelight, you know, as a stand, because it has not really been, you know, a very fair one for her over the years.
Talking about the British draws at the Australian Open and British tennis players, Katie Butler is the first, let's say, #1 British player right now, and she's been seeded at just the age of 22, and you will say, yes, that looks good. She has a Canadian to contend with, Rebecca Marino. We hope to at least knock out the British #1 at the Australian Open, and that will be a major upset at the Australian Open.
Yeah, let's see. That will actually be a very major upset. Don't forget, she had a very impressive performance in the United Cup, and we hope that, you know, she's going to replicate that as well, you know, in this particular Australian Open. You see the lady talking about Rebecca from Canada. Might not really be a very tough opponent, but you never can tell. We've actually seen the very best being dethroned. You can't actually predict the outcome of some games like this. So I think for me, we just have to see what, you know, she'll be able to bring to the table. She's another, you know, impressive British player that have shown her worth, you know, over time. We just hope that this is going to be that year where, you know, the British players will live up to expectation, especially for the likes of Emma Raducanu and Butler as well. A lot of expectation on them. We'll just look forward to see how, of course, she'll be able to start the Australian Open this year.
Looking at British players at the Australian Open that gets underway already in Australia, in Melbourne, we know that there's a certain Jack Draper. He's been seated #15 at the Australian Open, and he has to contend with Mariano Navarro from Argentina. Do you think Jack Draper can make a statement at this year's Australian Open?
Definitely. I have my confidence. I have a very full confidence on him. Don't forget, he's the #1 British player when it has to do with tennis. So I think for me, when you take a look at Jack Draper, he actually had a very impressive performance, you know, last year. With also Cameron Norrie also was there, you know, to also put up a very impressive performance. But I think for me, Jack Draper was very outstanding. And coming down to this year, this should be another phase for him, another moment where he have to show, you know, his energy once again. I think for me, the man from Argentina, not really a very tough opponent, you know, for him. I think that should be an easy pass for Jack Draper. Okay,
now let's get to the big one at the Australian Open when it comes to draws. The world #1 in female tennis, Aryna Sabalenka, is clearly waiting for what to me looks like a tricky opponent, Sloane Stephens. Remember her, the 2017 US Open champion, is up against Aryna Sabalenka in the very first game at the Australian Open for females. World #1. Aryna Sabalenka not yet ready to let off. She's won the Australian Open twice consecutively now, and she's looking out to be one of the very exciting tennis players to win the Australian Open consecutively 3 times. I can't remember when we saw a lady win the Australian Open 3 times. Can Aryna Sabalenka dispatch Sloane Stephens from the United States of America in the very first round?
For me, I think it's going to be, for me, an easy pass. When you take a look at, you know, what Aryna Sabalenka, of course, what she's done so far for herself. Last year, she had a very impressive performance, finishing the year as world #1. Even coming down, of course, you know, to this year, I think she actually won a title for herself, you know, recent. That should tell you that, of course, she's still very much optimistic. She's still very much, you know, with that, you know, high level of form. And for me, I'm not really seeing this first-round encounter being a difficult one for her. Aryna Sabalenka looking very much optimistic, looking at the fact that she has a lot to achieve, being the first woman in tennis probably to have won the Australian Open 3 times, to win the Australian Open 3 times in a row. That is the target, of course, she has, for herself this year. I think for me, that alone is a high level of motivation for Aryna Sabalenka, and I don't think she'll want to let this opportunity to, slip by at this point in time. So for me, it's going to be an interesting one, but I'm not seeing this particular, first-round encounter being a difficult one for her.
Well, if you follow the Australian Open, one of the highlights of this year's Australian Open will be the performances of Novak Djokovic, world number 2 right now in world male tennis. Everybody is looking at the number 25. No other person, male and female, has won in 25 in modern tennis. And so Novak Djokovic, who has already won 24 of Grand Slams, will be looking at breaking and making history if he wins this year's Australian Open. First, he has to contend with a very tricky American opponent. Navratilova is been drawn to face Novak Djokovic in the very first fixture. Kingsley, what do you make of this one? For me, it's very tricky. Nishish from I think United States of America to contend with world number 1 Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic, don't forget, is right now being coached by
Andy Murray.
Andy Murray, one of his foes in course of his last 24 Grand Slam win.
I think for me, it's been an impressive chemistry between Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic. We've seen them down there in Australia getting trained. Andy Murray just standing and watching him, of course, train, giving him some good instructions in order for him to step up his game. I think for me, it's a good combination. One will ask what did Novak Djokovic sees in Andy Murray that he has to take him as a coach. I think if you take a look at it, Andy Murray is one of those fantastic players, back in the days that had that impressive, serve, that power serve, as it stands. And he has those tricks that could possibly help a player, on the court. And that's why Djokovic have to go for him to make sure, of course, he gets himself equipped, as it stands. 37 years of age, though one might say age not only by Djokovic's side, but I think when it comes to do with the experience and the trick, not necessarily the energy at this point in time, I think he has what it takes, to be able to get this one done and dusted. But it promises to be an intense one. The first game, I don't think will be a problem for him, but as he progresses, that is where, of course, he's going to contend with the big guys. Don't forget, the other players are also not relenting, likes of Jannik Sinner. Carlos Alcaraz probably didn't have a very good year last year, but I think this year he wants to really bounce back, as it stands. So it promises to be an exciting one, but point in time, you really want to give it up to him that he has what it takes to dispatch Jari, in that particular encounter. So we just look forward to see how it goes. Though you can never at some point, predict the match, 100%. Anything can still happen, but I'm not really seeing Jannik Sinner, of course, leaving the competition in the very first stage of the encounter. That will be so disappointing to him, and as well as his fans as well. I see him taking out Jari with ease in that particular way. A lot awaits the man. I think this is the year Jannik Sinner have to prove to his critics, to those who doubt his ability, that he is really the man of the moment. Because a lot of persons have been pointing fingers at him and saying that the reason why he has actually made it this far in his career and also being the world #1 at this point in time is as a result of him taking some prohibited substance and also some of the preferential treatment being given to him by the tennis integrity unit. A lot of fingers at him at this point in time. So for me, I think 2025 should be a season where Yannick Sinner should be able to prove, to his critics and his doubters that, of course, tennis really is in him.
Talking about Yannick Sinner, world #1 in male tennis, with a little bit of controversy, if you ask me there. We'll take a look at more of these exciting fixtures at on our program Sports Extraordinary later at 6 p.m. Nigerian time. Don't forget that see Taylor Fritz. There is, of course, Danny Medvedev, and of course, do I say the what everybody is looking at that can cause some upset? Carlos Alcaraz, the man from Spain. We'll look at their fixtures, ahead of the Australia Open that gets underway proper on Sunday. Right now, we're having the qualifiers, going on, but the main draw at the Australia Open gets started on Sunday. So, Kingsley, let's take a peep at what could be Carlos Alcaraz, Taylor Fritz, Danny Medvedev. Can they upset Yannick Sinner?
It's going to be a very tough one at this point in time, because I think Yannick Sinner is on a very good form at this point in time. For Carlos Alcaraz, I just hope that it's going to bring back that high level of confidence, in him once again. Last year, I think
he didn't do well last year, right?
Yeah, things started going bad for him after he lost that Olympic final against Novak Djokovic. It was not really himself anymore. He started losing games, down to the very end of the season. But we hope that it's going to really bounce back, this season, looking at the fact that this is a fresh year, a fresh season for him. It should be a fresh perspective, for Carlos Alcaraz, and see how he can be able, of course, to fill in the shoes of Rafael Nadal, because Rafael Nadal has retired, and he is the man, of course, everyone is looking forward to down there, in Spain. So he should be able to prove himself once again as the next Rafael Nadal by coming up this season with that high level of confidence, and see how, of course, he can possibly challenge with the likes of Novak Djokovic and Yannick Sinner going forward.
Carlos Alcaraz, at the age of 21, is looking forward to completing a career Grand Slam in tennis. Let's see whether 2025 will be that year where Australian Open, Carlos Alcaraz from Spain could do a career Grand Slam just at the age of 21. Let's take a break now. I think when we return from the break, we'll bring you some more exciting sporting stories. There's more to come from basketball. There's been an issue in Los Angeles, United States of America, that has affected the early fixtures. When we return from the break, we'll give you that. And don't forget, in football, a lot more to come. Reactions around the head coach of the Super Eagles of Nigeria, and we hope it could all be sorted out. And if you're a follower of Spanish football, there is El Clasico coming up this weekend. FC Barcelona against Real Madrid in faraway Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. That fixture promises to be super thrilling. It is the Spanish Super Copa Cup. We'll give you details when we return from the break. Talk here on Atlantic Television Network. We'll be keeping you posted around the latest happening around the world of sports, especially here in Nigeria, where the National Sports Commission has swung into action with the posting of Secretary General to respective sporting federation here in the country. And time for us now to look at what is latest in basketball. And Kingsley, In faraway United States of America, over 180 residents are being moved from their residence owing to wildfire. And this has affected the Los Angeles Lakers fixture today against Charlotte Hornets. This is an unforeseen circumstance. LA Lakers can't play at home because of fire in the region.
So sad, and from reports we got, about 10 people lost their life, due to this natural disaster. I think for me, it's actually an unfortunate one at this point in time for the people down there in Los Angeles. And we hope that, of course, they'll be able to, try to see how to put things in place by making sure that at least those that have been displaced will definitely find home, to get themselves, to get their life, going at this point in time. But I think for the Los Angeles, I think another moment for them to rejuvenate themselves and see how possibly they can look forward to bounce back and play that particular encounter. But for me, for what happened, I think for me, it's really an unfortunate incident, and we hope that those who have lost their life, may their soul rest in Christ's bosom.
Well, we say amen to that. It's still very tricky in Los Angeles. We told you the fixture that is supposed to be on and about now is being postponed because of the wildfire in the region that's led to 180,000 residents being evacuated. Across, we have Carl Leeward. You know him, he plays for LA Clippers. He is reported to be leaving his team, LA Clippers, to be with his family because they have been relocated from their home out there in Los Angeles as well.
Definitely. I think this will go a long way in affecting some of the players. Some of them, of course, really have to get themselves, in place. Just like you mentioned, Carl Leeward, having to relocate at this point in time. It will have a way of affecting, some of the players, as it stands. Even though most of them might not be affected when it has to do with their homes, and all of that. Most of them might not be relocating due to the fact that probably their homes were not affected. But somehow it has a way of affecting the psychology of the team, looking at what has happened. Most of, the people affected as well are fans of the team. And I think for me, they really have to see how they can put themselves in order if they really want to go far this time around. They look forward to see how to get the players, of course, intact. They have to have, a talk to make sure they boost the morale of the players and as well comfort the team to make sure that, they get themselves, going this season.
Well, there's been a force majeure in Los Angeles, United States of America, especially in basketball and other sports as well. Let's look at some matches that have been played in the early hours of this morning out there in the NBA. Kingsley, Miami Heat seem to have bounced back. They beat Utah Jazz away by 97 points to 92. But for me, this looks like a fixture that has not been exciting. Less than 100 points coming from these two sides in an NBA fixture.
Of course, you see, if you take a look at Utah Jazz and Miami Heat, they've not been that fantastic this season. And a lot of expectation, of course, from them. But especially Miami Heat, who have actually shown some level of consistency over time. But this season seems to be not a very rosy one for them. I think the man, of course, who actually helped them much, in that encounter was Jacques Jr., who had about 20 points, of course, in that game. Our very own Bam Adebayo was also, in the fixture, and he had about 15 points. Taylor Hero, of course, has about 23 points in that game. Those were the standard players, for Miami Heat in that particular encounter, and that was where they were able to get that victory. Struggling against Utah Jazz, as well, not been that fantastic. I think for me, that shouldn't be the level of performance, from Miami Heat. I actually expect more from them this season.
Talking about U.S. fixtures in the NBA, the early hours of this morning, we saw Phoenix Suns bounce back to winning ways. They scored 123 points against their opponent, Atlanta Hawks, that scored just 115 points. Kingsley, is Suns back?
Really, are they back?
Has the sun set again?
For me, I think we just have to watch out to see how it goes, for them. A lot, of course, a lot of expectation from the Phoenix Suns. If you take a look at it, they have some interesting players. The likes of Kevin Durant, the likes of Devin Booker. These are players that have actually showed out the burden of the Phoenix Suns. But this season, I think a lot of expectation from them, and they've not really shown that sparkling performance. For Kevin Durant, in that particular encounter, I think he did his best at about 23 points. But, on the normal day, you should expect Kevin Durant to pull up more than that, particular number. Devin Booker was also one man who had a very impressive time on the court, had about 20 points in that game, and that was why, of course, they were able to hold their own in that encounter. For me, I really expect to see more from the Phoenix Suns.
Talking about seeing more, that's what we are seeing from Houston Rockets. Houston Rockets continue to win, and they went to Memphis and beat Grizzlies by 119 points to 115. Houston Rockets posting results that are very exciting these days.
Yes, of course. For me, I think impressive one for them. If you take a look at it, I think they're also one side that also demand that their fans are also expecting a little of performance, from them. But they have not really, of course, been up there to actually, contend in a favorable way at this season. I think one man talked about Shegun was the man who actually had a very impressive one in that one. Had about 32 points in that game, and Van Vliet also came up with 32 points, and Jay Green came up with 27 points, and that was how they were able to salvage that victory in that particular encounter. A lot, of course, we would look out for from the Houston Rockets, and we hope they continue to build and see how they can also, get to win more games before the season comes to an end.
Cleveland Cavaliers continue to post exciting result, 132 points as compared to 126 points scored by Toronto Raptors. High-scoring match, I must say.
Yeah, high-scoring match. You talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think they've been so fantastic, and for me, they've really done so well this season. They're one of the best when it has to do with their group, and I must give them kudos because they've been so good. And if you take a look at it, they've done so well. The likes of Allen came up with about 18 points, and Gallant G came up with 40 points in that game. 40 points, and that was, if you ask me, that was very massive, of course, for him. If you take a look at it, I didn't expect this level of performance from the Cavaliers, but they're just coming up with that surprises as well. I was expecting Bolton Celtic, of course, to maybe though they're also doing well, but for the Cavaliers, I tell you, they've been so fantastic, and I look forward to see how the season, of course, will end for them.
Well, now let's go to football from basketball, and the start from a local scene here where Rangers International seem to understand the business because they are now taking a partnership with a Swiss company aimed at improving the performances of Rangers International. In fact, they've had some deal with the Swiss side FC Chauvelin to improve on the relationship between these two sides, and especially on and off the pitch.
Of course, this is what we expect, from some MPFL teams. You shouldn't just stay and depend on the money from the state governments to be able to finance the team or make the team stand out. We expect, teams to go out there, be able to sell yourself, get those deals, to make sure that, you motivate the team, motivate the players. Because whenever these deals comes like this, it has a way of motivating the players and making them have that confidence that the team is going places. And for me, it's a good one. Talking about Rangers, since they got Ezeaku, who is the general manager of the side, I think things have really changed. We've seen him being able to put the team in order. Last season, they won the league under, of course, his tutelage as well with coach Fledis Ilechukwu. And this season, they're also not leaving any stone unturned. They are currently, I think, either 5th or 4th on the table, almost close, of course, to the top of the table as it stands. So for me, I think these are what we need at this point in time, in the Nigerian Premier Football League, where we have the right people at the end of affairs like Ezeaku, who has actually been into football administration. He has even gone outside the country to make sure he gets to educate himself more, and he's back and he's doing well with Rangers International. I think for me, it's been a rosy one. We just hope that they continue this impressive form administratively and as well on the pitch.
Rangers International, one of the oldest football club side here in Nigeria, with the record 6 titles, I think are beginning to show the way to go to the other 19 club sides that play in the Premier League here in Nigeria. Now let's get to the big one coming in from football here in Nigeria in the last few days. We've seen the appointment of Eric Chell as the head coach of the Super Eagles of Nigeria by the Nigerian Football Federation. But this appointment has not gone down well with most Nigerians, and notably stakeholders as well. Kadri Kana, former Super Eagles player and former Super Falcons head coach as well, is not happy about the appointment of Eric Chell, saying that he's no better than a local coach here in Nigeria, and for him it is unfair to the local coaches to appoint a Malian to head the Super Eagles of Nigeria when his counterparts are many in Nigeria.
Somehow, if you ask him, Mr. Suri, is a slap, to the home-based coaches we have in the country. We have the likes of Emmanuel Amuliki in the country. We have Samson Siasia down there. Let me not mention Finette George because I think does not have a good face down there with the Nigerian Football Federation. Doing take a look at what happened the last time he was there. At this point, Eguavon. For me, I don't really say anything wrong, about the Eguavon football. He actually helped them to qualify for the African Cup of Nations. Why don't you give him the go-ahead? Especially when you take a look at the fact that we have, about 2 months to the World Cup qualifiers. Why don't you give him the job? He's already been with the team. You understand the players. He knows them very well. Why don't you just give him the job, to carry on and see what he'll be able to do with the side? Eric Chile, is it the man that can build a formidable Super Eagles team? That's the big question. Is it the man that can help us to qualify for the World Cup, looking at the position at where we are in the group? It's really a very big question at this point in time. If you take a look at his CV, he has not really, apart from coaching the Malian side, which other notable team has he coached? Of course, he will understand he was coaching Oran. Is that really a big side? I think this is the biggest job he has gotten in his career at this point in time. And for me, if you ask me, I'm not really pleased with his appointment. But no doubt, let us see what comes up at this point in time. If he can help the Super Eagles qualify for the World Cup, it's going to be a very huge one. But at the end of the day, can he actually build that Super Eagles team that everyone will be afraid of, that every other African countries will be afraid of? So that's actually the big one at this point in time. For me, I'm not really pleased with his appointment because I think we would have gone for a better manager than him that would possibly, of course, even though we don't qualify for the World Cup, but we know that this manager can be able to build a very good Super Eagles team, for the future.
We expect that Eric Chale should arrive in Nigeria any moment soon, but first he has to terminate his contract with Algerian side MC Oran. Is this possible? Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed in the days ahead and see what is going to make of it. Across Europe, the Air Clasico is here. Another Air Clasico, so to say, is here because in Jeddah last night we saw Real Madrid, overpower Real Mallorca in 3-0 bashing, meaning now that they will have to contend with FC Barcelona in the final of the Super Cup in the same Saudi Arabian city of Jeddah. Kingsley, anytime FC Barcelona plays against Real Madrid, it's always, let's say, inflamed war. Now, it will be yet another turn between FC Barcelona and Real Madrid to contend in the Spanish Super Copa Cup.
Impressive one. I think for me, it's going to be an interesting clash. Which will be beautiful, of course, to behold. From what we've seen so far, I think Carlo Ancelotti and his men, they've done so well last night. They thrashed Mallorca 3-0 in that particular encounter, while Barcelona also got past Athletic Club. I think that was 2-1 in that game. So it's been an impressive one between both sides. And this is going to be the 3rd time they'll be meeting in the Super Cup, championship, and it promises to be an exciting one as it stands. I think for me, if you take a look at it, Madrid are super ready, and for Barcelona, they're also ready. Don't forget, they've also gotten the inclusion of Dani Olmo. I understand it has been difficult for him to be registered, but I think due to some legal issues, they've been able to put that one intact. So I think Barcelona will be going into this one looking very ready. The likes of Dani Olmo and the rest of the players, of course, Rafinha, you mentioned, has also been very fantastic with them. So I think from what we've seen, it promises to be an interesting Super Cup at a Clasico from what we've seen at this point in time. We'll just see who gets this one at the end of the day.
Well, let's go across now to England, and where there has been managerial casualties in the last few hours. Everton has seen their coach Shondeg, fired, and they have an interim coach. But last night it looked like everything went well because they were able to smart their opponent by 2-0. But Shondeg, the man you see on your screen there, has been in charge and has not been able to win in let's say in 11 fixtures. What do you make of it? New ownership, new manager, expected for FC Everton?
Yeah, so sometimes that's what happens whenever a new ownership comes. They want to change things, at this point in time. But for me, I think Sandak has tried. He came into that side in 2023 with no much, notable players, in that side. Remember, of course, I think he has to take over that job from Frank Lampard, who was almost, sinking down to the relegation in that one. But he was able to put Everton back, in the Premier League, even when about 10 points.
Last night.
10 points was even deducted from Everton, but they were able. Still, he was able to fight and keep them in the Premier League. And now, due to the fact that in about 11 games this season, he only won once. I think for me that's actually a poor result.
Very poor result. In 10 of those fixtures, he didn't score.
There was no goal. In those fixtures, I think for me, poor result, and the new owners are not pleased at this point in time. They want to make a change, and don't forget they'll be coming with the money. And if they comes up with the money, it means the manager have to be on his toes to work, and that's why they have to let Sandai go at this point in time. But let's just see what Everton will be made up of at this point in time.
It looks like they want to bring back their former manager.
Let's just see. I think that has been, of course, in the news, but it's not official yet. We'll just wait to see if that, of course, will come to reality. 16 on the log. If they don't take time, don't forget Everton in the last 2 seasons, they've been struggling in the relegation zone. They've been surviving relegation. We'll just hope that this season they will not be relegated.
Talking about teams firing their coaches midway here in the Premier League in England, West Ham too have been in the news for getting their coach fired, and the new one employed almost immediately. Graham Potter, former coach of Chelsea, is back to job, and he's this time as head coach of West Ham.
Yeah, but for me, I think Graham Potter, does he still have the magic in him? We saw what he did in Brighton before he came down to Chelsea. In fact, it was what he did in Brighton that Chelsea, of course, got him. But when he came to Chelsea, I think the problem of Chelsea, engulfed him, and he wasn't able, of course, to unleash, his brilliance, his skills. And he has to, of course, shown the exit door. He left, and now at West Ham United, I think this is going to be another, task for him. Since David Moyes left West Ham, I think West Ham, they've been shaking. And Graham Potter, does he still have that magical touch, to transform a team? That's what, of course, we're going to be looking at this point in time. West Ham, they've been on the struggling end this season. And the season, of course, this is almost to say the second stage of the league. And they really have to prove themselves, once again, to be one of those teams to reckon with in the Premier League. We'll just see what Graham Potter, of course, will bring to the table. He's one manager that is highly respected down there in England. Can he, of course, change the narrative for West Ham? That's what everyone will be looking out for.
Well, the issues this weekend, there will be no Premier League football, but there is plenty, very plenty of the FA Cup third-round fixtures. And one notable fixture that will be absent in this year's third-round fixture at the FA Cup will be the absence of video assistant referee, popularly called VAR. Kingsley, good decision?
If you ask me, is it a good decision? Of course, the Premier League, even the Premier League teams do not even like the video assistant referee. When you take a look at the controversies that has actually been on ground, for some seasons now, a lot of Premier League teams do not, like the video assistant referee. Probably, I think some of the teams will be pleased with this decision, because if you ask me, the video assistant referee, has he done more harm than good in England down there? I would say it has done more harm, because at some point you see some kind of calls being made and you ask yourself, what kind of thing is this? And it actually cost some teams, a lot. You talk about Arsenal, Mikel Arteta complaining last season, so many managers, complaining. I think for me, they just want to make sure that, they play the game without, much controversy. And that's why they've decided, of course, to, opt out, from using the video assistant referee at this point in time. Let's just see what the matches, of course, will look like without the video assistant referee.
Let's quickly stay away from England now, go to Germany, where our own Boniface, Victor Boniface, is being in the news. We understand he may not contend with Borussia Dortmund in a very drastic fixture coming up in the German Bundesliga. Kingsley, we understand he has some thigh muscle injury.
Yeah, of course. I think that was since last year, the break they had, and for me, he just have to get himself, in shape. and see how, of course, he can continue to score for Bayer Leverkusen, because that is where he scores his goals. Whenever he come to the Super Eagles of Nigeria, I think probably he normally leave his scoring boot at home. But at this point in time, we look forward to see a rejuvenated, Victor Boniface. I think if you take a look at the Super Eagles strikers we have, apart from Victor Osimhen, you talk about Ademola Lookman. He's one man, of course, everyone is looking out for. Maybe to contend for the African best player, award, once again. Because if you ask me, Boniface deserves it. If he actually do more and add more energy to his game, take a look at what he's been doing with the Bayer Leverkusen side. I think for me, he actually deserves a very good place when it has to do with, when you're listing best players stand here in Africa. So I just look forward to see, hope that, this season will be a very good one for Victor Boniface once again.
It is transfer season, this January, and they have a 1 month window to move. Players have to move, coaches can as well move in European football, and one man has moved. He's an Ivorian international. He has moved from Reims in France. This time around, Kingsley, we've seen him move all the way to the Premiership in England. Emmanuel Agbado, an Ivorian international, a defender, has moved from France to England. Can he stabilize FC Wolves that is at the brink of relegation?
Let's just see what comes up for him. Understand, moving. Don't forget, when you move from one team to the other, you also need to have that time to adjust and get yourself acclimatized. The French Ligue 1, very, very different from the Premier League. The Premier League very much competitive than the French Ligue 1. So any player coming from the French League, down to the Premier League, you must be on your toes. You must be alert, to make sure that you get adapted, to the weather first, and as well your team, at this point in time, as well as the philosophy of the manager. Let's just see what, of course, we'll be able to bring to the table for Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Well, we've run out of time, but there's more to come at 6 p.m. Nigerian time on the program Sport Extraordinary, when we'll take a further look at the new contract, 5-year contract given to Ahmad of Manchester United. The young lad, Ahmad Diallo, has been given a new 5-year contract in Manchester United. He's another Ivorian making waves in the Premiership in England. Until then, remember, peace and unity are clearly pathways to progress. Always enjoy here on Atlantic Television Network.